The storm had lifted just long enough for the plane to punch through the clouds and nose down toward the airstrip. The Rangers sat strapped into the fuselage, their gear rattling with every buffet of wind. No one spoke. The only sound was the drone of the engines and the intermittent crackle of the onboard comms. Captain Harlow scanned his squad, 8 in total. Hardened men and women, trained to walk into places where no one else would. But even here he could see it, the tension around the eyes, the tightening of jaw lines. No one liked being dispatched to a base that technically didn't exist. The pilot's voice bled through their headsets. "Fort Kestrel in sight. Copy that. No welcoming party on the ground." The Ranger team exchanged looks. A facility this size should have had at least a skeleton crew visible. Instead, the tarmac was white with drifted snow, a lonely radar tower rising crookedly above the barracks. The hangars stood with their doors half open, snow curling inside like slow tongues. The plane touched down hard, skidding slightly before grinding to a stop. Engines died. The silence was immediate and heavy. "Lock and load," Harlow ordered. The Rangers spilled out into the biting cold, their boots crunched on the snow, breaths fogging as they spread out, weapons raised. Above them, the radar dish groaned as it turned, though no power should have been left. Its slow skeletal movement was the only sign of life. Corporal Vega, always the joker until the jokes ran thin, muttered over comms, "Looks like everyone just got up and walked away." They moved toward the nearest building, the barracks. The door was ajar, snow crusted around the frame. Inside was warmer, but not by much. The lights were dim, flickering on backup power. The mess hall smelled of spoiled food and ammonia. Bowls of half-eaten stew sat in rows, long since frozen into lumps. A chair lay overturned near the far wall. Staff rooms were worse. Personal effects, clothes, wallets, letters, left behind in heaps. A coffee mug shattered in a hallway as if dropped mid-step. But no bodies. Not one. Sergeant O'Neill clicked his tongue. Panic evacuation. No way this was orderly. They swept the hangars next. One still held a helicopter, rotors sagging under the weight of ice, side door yawning open. The toolkits around it were spilled as though the mechanics had walked away mid-repair. The second hangar was empty, tire tracks leading out toward the frozen runway, but stopping abruptly in the snow. Whatever vehicle it was never made it far. Then the housing building, the place where officers and scientists bunked. Papers littered the floors, reports stamped with black ink seals of clearance far above the Rangers' pay grade. Desks overturned, lockers hanging open. Blood smears here, faint but real. A handprint dragged down the wall near the stairwell as though someone had been pulled downward against their will. Private Torres stopped short near a locked steel door in the basement level. Above it, in flaking red stenciling, "Secure access. Authorized personnel only." The lock mechanism was intact, but someone had left it on standby, humming faintly with backup power. Harlow studied it, jaw tightening. This is it, the entrance to the real facility. The team fell into formation. O'Neill wired into the panel, sparks jumping as he worked. The lock clanked, gears whirring, and the heavy door groaned open on pistons. Beyond yawned a steel elevator shaft, lit in dull emergency red, descending deep into the earth. A faint hum rose up from below, something mechanical and wrong, like a heartbeat rendered in iron. The Rangers exchanged a look. No radio, no survivors, and no road out but up, Vega said, shaking his head. Feels like a bad bet, Captain. Harlow stepped inside the elevator, rifle held low but ready. His voice was steady, though his eyes betrayed the weight pressing down on him. Orders are orders. We find out what happened here. One by one, the Rangers followed, boots clanging on the grated floor of the lift. O'Neill hit the panel, and with a groan the doors sealed them in. The elevator lurched, then began to descend. The red light painted their faces, hollow and grim. Above, the world of snow and silence vanished. Ahead, only the deep, humming dark awaited. The elevator groaned down the shaft, gears grinding like they hadn't been serviced in years. Emergency lights pulsed every few seconds, casting the team in alternating washes of red and shadow. No one spoke. The only sound was the clink of gear shifting and the hollow thrum rising from deep below. When the doors finally slid open, the air was warmer, tinged with iron and something chemical. Bleach, maybe, or ammonia. The corridor stretched ahead, lined with reinforced doors stamped security, command, and surveillance. Captain Harlow signaled the team to spread. Boots echoed on the concrete as they cleared the first rooms. The security hub was chaos. Lockers stood half open, gear spilling onto the floor. Monitors buzzed with static, though one still played a frozen image of the airfield above, grainy, caught mid-frame, like a photograph trapped in time. O'Neill leaned over the console, fingers brushing wires. Power's erratic, backup generators running, but something's draining the system, he muttered. In the corner, Vega swept his rifle over the walls, stopping at a patch of deep gouges. 4 long parallel lines dragged down the steel paneling, bending the metal inward. He whistled low. "Tell me a man did that, and I'll eat my rifle." The administration wing was no better. Offices looked abandoned mid-crisis, papers strewn, chairs tipped over, reports marked with black ink and heavy stamps of classified. One desk still held a phone receiver dangling off its cord, a faint hiss of static seeping from it. Private Torres picked it up. "Base command? This is Ranger Recon." A voice whispered back, faint but distinct. "Help us." Torres jerked, nearly dropping the receiver. The line cut instantly to silence. He stared at the others, face pale. "Could have been playback," O'Neill offered, though his voice carried no confidence. They regrouped in the briefing room, long tables scattered with maps of the Arctic shelf, red circles marked over deep fissures in the ice. In one corner, a projector screen flickered on its own, replaying a loop of footage. Facility staff hustling through corridors, alarms blaring. A man in a lab coat shouted orders, pointing toward the elevator shaft. Then the feed glitched, froze, and cut to black. The Rangers froze when a sound echoed down the hall behind them. A rhythmic, metallic thumping. Weapons raised, they advanced. The sound grew louder, reverberating through the steel corridors until they reached a locked door stamped Armory. The thumping came from the other side. Hard, aggressive. "Something's inside," Vega whispered. Harlow nodded to O'Neill. He crouched, wired the panel, sparks flashing across his gloves. With a clank, the door creaked open. The team braced for movement. The room was empty. Only racks of rifles left in disarray, boxes of ammo spilled across the floor. But the far wall was covered in deep scratches, same as the security hub, metal curled outward this time, as though something had been clawing its way out. The thumping stopped the moment they entered. Then, faintly, from somewhere deeper below, came a low hum. Not machinery this time. Not mechanical. Something layered, resonant, almost like a voice carried through the walls. Private Torres shifted uneasily. "You hear that? Like it's calling." Captain Harlow's face was stone. "Stay sharp. We move to the next floor." The team regrouped at the stairwell leading further down. The hum grew stronger there, vibrating faintly in their bones. Red light bled from below like a warning flare. With weapons ready, they descended into the deeper dark. The stairwell felt longer than it should have been, each step echoing with a hollow clang that carried far below. By the time they reached the next landing, the air had changed, damp, metallic, and cloyingly sweet, like spoiled meat washed with disinfectant. The door to floor 2 creaked open with a groan. A rush of warm, stale air hit them, carrying a stench that made Torres gag into his sleeve. The medical bay stretched before them, rows of gurneys and curtained-off beds. Most were empty, but restraints dangled from their sides, some bent outward as if torn open with incredible force. On one bed, the mattress was shredded, stuffing pulled out in long, claw-like tears. Sergeant O'Neill swept his flashlight beam across the wall. Words had been scrawled in jagged strokes of blood or paint, impossible to tell which. "Don't listen to the ice." Vega chuckled dryly, but his voice cracked. Real reassuring. They moved on to the infirmary offices. Cabinets were toppled, medical charts scattered. Autopsy photos covered a desk, grainy shots of humanoid remains with translucent skin stretched tight over elongated bones. One image showed a face, but the skull was too broad, the eyes too far apart. Another had its ribcage peeled back, organs shriveled like dried fruit. "Not human," Torres muttered. His voice shook despite himself. Not even close. In the lab section, they found glass cryo tanks. Most were intact, frost clinging to the inside. Something shifted in one of them, just a trick of condensation, Harlow told himself, though his finger tightened on the trigger. Then they reached the shattered one. Its glass lay in shards across the floor, slick with a thin black fluid that pulsed faintly as though alive. The puddle stretched toward the drain in jagged rivulets, resisting the downward pull like veins crawling across the tile. "Stay clear of it," Harlow ordered, his voice iron. They advanced deeper. It was there they heard it first. Footsteps. The Rangers froze, weapons raised. Down the hall past the shattered cryotank, something moved. The shape flickered into view at the far corner, a man in a tattered lab coat staggering. He collapsed against the wall, coughing wetly. They rushed forward. Vega knelt, flashlight sweeping the man's pale face. His eyes were glassy, his lips bluish. Blood dripped from his nose. "Jesus, he's alive," Vega breathed. "We got a survivor." The man's eyes rolled back, then snapped open with sudden clarity. His voice came in gasps, frantic. "You shouldn't have come. They woke it up. The ice, the voices." He convulsed, clawing at Vega's vest. "Don't go down, don't!" The lights overhead flickered. For one heartbeat of darkness, the man's eyes seemed black and bottomless. When the lights snapped back, he was gone. No body, no blood, only Vega on the floor staring at his empty hands. "What the fuck?" Torres whispered. No one answered. O'Neill swallowed hard. "Captain, that wasn't natural. Nothing just vanishes like." Then Torres hissed. "Movement!" Up high, they raised rifles. The thermal scope picked it up first, a glowing outline slithering across the ceiling vent. Too thin, too long. Arms, or what looked like arms, stretched farther than they should, joints bending wrong. The thing paused, head, or whatever passed for one, tilting down at them. Then it slid into the dark, the sound of skittering metal echoing through the ductwork. The Rangers stood frozen, barrels following empty space. Captain Harlow broke the silence. "We keep moving." Eyes sharp. That wasn't the last one. They pushed deeper into the labs, the emergency lights flickering more violently now, shadows bending and stretching like they were alive. The hum from the lower levels pulsed through the floor, stronger than ever, worming its way into their bones. And behind it, faint but growing clearer, came whispers. Dozens of them. In a language no one recognized, yet somehow each ranger felt they almost understood. The stairwell down was warmer still, but wrong, like standing too close to a furnace vent that shouldn't exist this deep under permafrost. Moisture dripped down the walls, hissing faintly as it hit the steel steps. The rangers descended in silence, rifles sweeping, every breath tight with anticipation. The door to floor 3 opened with a groan. The smell hit first. Not rot, not chemical, burnt air, the tang of scorched metal and ozone. The floor stretched wide, a cavernous engineering sector, lined with pipes and catwalks, the thrum of machines beating like a second pulse beneath the rangers' boots. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows across massive turbines and generators that glowed faintly with overstrain. "This place is alive," Torres whispered. "Listen to it." O'Neill checked a console, frowning. Backup generators aren't just running, they're being bled dry. Power's being diverted down below. Something's drawing it, feeding on it. They crossed the walkways, boots clanging. Harlow noticed frost forming and unnatural patterns across the walls, vein-like lines of ice branching outward from a deep fissure torn into the floor. Steam rose where the ice touched the hot pipes, but the patterns persisted like something crawling up from the ground itself. In the control hub, monitors still flickered. Logs scrolled across one. Project Signal Resonance Phase 3. Contact initiated. Erratic frequency detected. Staff unstable. Recommend containment. Subjects responding to whispers. "Contact," Vega muttered, reading over Harlow's shoulder. "With what?" The answer came from the far end of the chamber. The lights died with a snap. The cavern plunged into red emergency glow. A screech of metal echoed through the space, followed by the crash of something heavy dropping onto the catwalk. The rangers spun, rifles raised. Thermal scopes caught it first. A shape, elongated, jointed wrong, hunched on all fours, its body glowing faintly against the cold steel. Its head swiveled with insect-like speed, eyes catching the emergency light, reflecting red. It moved. Faster than anything human, it vaulted the catwalk, slamming into Corporal Vega. Both went crashing against the rail. Vega screamed, unloading rounds point blank into its chest. The sound was wet, not bone, not muscle, like shooting into packed snow. Torres fired, O'Neill too. The thing shrieked, its voice layered, not one sound but many, vibrating through the air like static. It jerked back, limbs flailing unnaturally, then scuttled upward, vanishing into the pipes overhead. Vega lay on the deck, chest heaving, armor plate cracked but intact. His hands shook as he reloaded. Not human. Not anything. They regrouped fast. The hum from below had grown into a low-frequency roar, vibrating in their teeth. Pipes rattled. The fissures in the walls pulsed faintly, like veins filled with light. Then the power core chamber ahead erupted in sparks. The reactor, massive, ringed with spinning turbines, glowed far too bright. Alarms wailed across the level. The resonance was deafening now, a constant droning chord. Over it, faintly, came words, whispers in a language that burrowed into the mind. The rangers covered their ears. Torres fell to his knees, screaming, firing wildly at shadows. O'Neill grabbed him, shaking hard until he stopped. On the far wall, something vast shifted behind glass, a containment bay, its view slashed with frost and cracks. Inside, just visible through the haze, something writhed against its restraints. Long, thin, pale. Too many joints. Its mouth, or mouths, opened, pressing against the glass. The whispers grew louder. The glass cracked. Harlow's voice cut through, steady but raw. "We're done here. Next level. Move." As they backed toward the stairwell, the whispers followed, growing clearer, closer. Each ranger swore the words were different, spoken directly to them in voices of lost family, old lovers, friends long dead. And as they descended further, the last thing they heard was the sound of the containment glass finally giving way. The stairwell door slammed shut behind them, sealing floor 3 above in a chorus of alarms and groaning steel. The air was thicker here, oppressive, every breath hot and humid, carrying a faint copper tang. Floor 4 spread out in a maze of corridors, containment cells on one side, observation rooms on the other. Thick glass partitions, reinforced steel doors, and rows of glowing monitors. But the monitors showed nothing now, just static or looping video. Faces of staff staring blankly into cameras, repeating the same phrase on mute. The Rangers pressed forward, flashlights cutting arcs through the bloom. The first cell they passed was empty, but the frost on the glass wasn't from the outside. It was smeared from within, a dense film of ice and condensation, as though something had breathed on it for hours. The next cell wasn't empty. Something slumped in the corner, thin, pale skin stretched taut across a too-long frame. Its chest rose and fell in shallow motions. When Torres whispered, "Alive," the thing's head snapped up. Its eyes weren't human, too wide, too black, like holes punched into its skull. The jaw opened, unhinged, and a voice poured out, not its own, but overlapping dozens of voices at once. A woman crying, a child laughing, a man shouting for help. The glass vibrated, then cracked. "Move!" Harlow barked, pushing them forward. The testing chamber was worse. Long tables, restraints, shredded. Strange machines stood silent, massive tuning fork constructs humming faintly even without power, resonating with the same frequency they had heard below. On one table lay a uniform torn to ribbons, the name tag still attached. The base security officer. The gurney around it was bent outward, steel twisted as though something inside had forced its way free. The hum rose suddenly. Every monitor in the observation room blinked to life. Not static now, but images. The Rangers themselves, caught in grainy black and white, from impossible angles, above, behind, even inside their own helmets. Then the screens shifted. Each Ranger saw themselves, but not as they were, dead. Throats slit, eyes black, blood soaking the floor. The images twitched and looped, jerking with interference. Torres fired his rifle, shattering one of the screens. The others cut out instantly. The whispers came again, closer now, from the ventilation shafts. Something slammed into the ductwork above. A shadow slid through the grating, long arms hooked with talons. Another thud. Another. Then the vents burst open. 3 of them poured out, tall, pale, impossibly thin, limbs folding and snapping as they hit the floor. Their mouths opened, overlapping voices spilling out like broken radios. The Rangers opened fire. The room lit with muzzle flashes, deafening bursts. One creature collapsed in a spray of black ichor, but the other 2 moved with unnatural speed, weaving between rounds, screeching. One lunged for O'Neill, slamming him against the wall. His armor held, but the impact rattled his bones. He jammed his sidearm into its chest and fired until it slumped, spasming. The third creature scuttled up the wall, vanishing into shadow before Harlow's shots caught it. The whispers retreated with it, fading into the dark. Heavy breathing filled the silence. Torres was shaking, muttering, "We're not making it out. We're not." "Shut it!" Vega snapped, though his own hands trembled. "We hold it together." They regrouped. Blood smeared across the floor, black and thick, seeping into the cracks. The hum below had grown into a constant vibration, rattling the glass, shaking dust from the ceiling. Harlow steadied himself, forcing calm into his tone. "Next level. Whatever this is, it started there. We finish it there." They moved as one, battered and bloodied toward the final stairwell. The whispers chased them, crawling across the walls, echoing in their helmets, until it was impossible to tell what was real. And as they reached the landing, a faint draft of air rose from below, warm, wet, alive. The dig site awaited. The final stairwell ended in a heavy blast door, dented inward from the other side. Heat radiated through the steel, a low thrumming pulse that made the Rangers' bones ache. Harlow gave the signal. O'Neill wired the panel, sparks showering. With a grinding protest, the door slid open. The dig site sprawled before them. It was enormous, an underground cavern carved from the glacier, reinforced with scaffolding and floodlights. But most of the lights were shattered, dangling like broken bones. In their pale glow, the Rangers saw the pit, a gaping wound in the ice, its edges jagged, descending into blackness. Around it, drilling rigs lay toppled, machinery twisted, and from the pit itself, steam and light rose in pulses, each one accompanied by that low, resonant hum. At the center of it all loomed something impossible. Half buried in the ice, a structure jutted out. Metallic yet organic, its surface ridged and glistening like living armor. It was not built. It had grown. Veins of frost spread outward from it, spiderwebbing across the cavern walls. The whispers were deafening now, not in their ears but in their minds. Jesus Christ, Vega breathed. They were digging up this. Harlow didn't answer. Movement rippled along the scaffolding. Shapes pulled free from the shadows. Dozens of them, long-limbed and pale, crawling down walls and ceilings like insects. Their mouths opened in perfect unison, and the voices became one, an echo of words in a language none of them knew, yet all somehow understood. Join us. The swarm descended. The Rangers opened fire, muzzles flaring, bullets shredded bodies, black ichor spraying. But for every one that fell, 3 more emerged. The cavern became chaos, gunfire, shrieking voices, claws scraping steel. Torres was dragged screaming into the dark before anyone could fire. Vega unloaded his rifle until the barrel smoked, screaming curses before a talon ripped across his chest, hurling him into the pit's edge. Harlow's orders were drowned in noise, but O'Neill heard enough. He pointed to the reactor core feeds lining the cavern, still humming with stolen power. We blow it! Only way. Harlow nodded, eyes hard. Set it. Now! O'Neill sprinted across the catwalks, creatures snapping at his heels. He jammed charges into the reactor conduits, sparks raining. His final transmission cracked over comms. You've got 5 minutes. Get topside. The team pulled back. Vega stumbled, bleeding, shoving Harlow toward the exit. Go! Don't waste me. He turned and charged the swarm, screaming, rifle blazing until they swallowed him whole. Harlow, O'Neill, and the last 2 Rangers fought their way up the stairwell, whispers chasing them like rising floodwater. The ground shook violently now, the core overloading, the dig site collapsing. The last glimpse through the blast door was of the swarm turning their heads upward in unison, eyes glowing like embers in the dark, before the cavern erupted in fire and ice. The survivors staggered onto the surface. Snow whipped around them, the radar tower groaning overhead. Behind them, a muffled roar shook the earth as the dig site imploded. Steam and fire belched upward from cracks in the runway, the facility shuddering as if in its death throes. The emergency beacon crackled alive again, though no one had touched it. The signal repeated over and over. Fort Kestrel, distress signal. Immediate assistance required. The Rangers froze. That wasn't their message. Harlow raised his eyes to the horizon. Through the storm, in the gray light of dawn, something vast shifted in the clouds above the glacier. Too big, too wrong, its shape flickering like it wasn't entirely there. The whispers carried on the wind. "We are already free." The snowstorm swallowed the ruins of Fort Kestrel, and the official reports would bury the truth deeper than the ice ever could. The rangers who returned would never speak of what they saw, and those who didn't, their names wouldn't even make it onto the books. But some signals never die. Some whispers never fade. And if you ever find yourself in the frozen silence of Alaska, and your radio begins to hum with voices that shouldn't be there, remember Fort Kestrel and turn back. Because down in the dark, beneath the glacier, something is still awake. If you enjoyed this descent into horror, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Campfire Horror Stories. Hit the bell so you never miss when the next tale surfaces from the dark. And share this story with someone who loves the cold bite of a good nightmare. Together, we'll keep the fire burning against the dark.